Today I'm giving you the last in the series of seller focused videos with tips about getting paid and contracts, and we're going to discuss how a seller can persuade a buyer to actually walk away from a purchase offer, and we're going to get started. Hello and welcome back to All Things Knoxville with me, Ben Barreto, your local real estate pro and relocation expert for East Tennessee. Before we jump into today's video, as always, I want to remind you that I make videos just like this every single week. So if you like this video and if you'd like to see more videos like it, please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, maybe share this video with someone that may find it helpful or educational. Lastly, if you are thinking of moving to East Tennessee or somewhere in between and you have questions, you need information and answers, or you just need a great realtor, give me a call, send me a text, shoot me an email, or sign me up, or you go sign up on my website. And listen, I love helping people I love helping people in real estate transactions. It's a huge purchase, it's a huge step in your life, and I like to be a guide to help you get through that with as little stress as possible. Now, with all that out of the way, let's jump into today's video. If you watch the first 3 videos in this series, then the first one being winning and how you get paid, and then how to get out of a purchase agreement and the potential consequences for doing it either the right way or the wrong way, which you can watch any of those by clicking right here. You can follow the link in the description as well. Then, you know, that's not that easy. You also know that it's not that easy to just cancel a purchase agreement with a buyer, especially if they're acting in good faith, which means that they're actually trying to make the sale work. Without a valid reason to terminate a contract, the seller can only really get out of the sale legally if the buyer releases them. There are 2 ways this typically happens. The more common is that the buyer backs out using one of their own contingencies. Less common is both parties mutually agree to cancel the contract and walk away. Make this note so it's clear though, which is the seller cannot force the buyer into either of these options. However, the seller may be able to use specific tactics to encourage the buyer to walk away from the offer that they just made on your home. As always, rules and regulations around these methods, around contracts and how to do these things are going to be different from state to state, so please check with your real estate agent or real estate attorney before you try any of these methods. So let's discuss the 2 points in more detail. First, let's talk about how to convince the buyers to exercise one of their contingencies to walk away. Now, if the buyer threatens to exercise one of their contingencies, the seller can play hardball to encourage them to walk away from the sale. This is most likely to happen if the buyer's home inspection reveals problems and has some issues in the report, or the home appraises for less than the agreed upon sales price. Obviously, if you've been in this market, those contingencies a lot of times are dropped out of a lot of offers these days just to get a house under contract. But in case you're in a market or you've received an offer where these matter, think about them. Now let's discuss the buyer to walk away after an inspection, which is probably the most common way for sales transactions to break up. Now, the seller may be able to convince the buyer to walk away by refusing to renegotiate following a home inspection. More than half of all real estate contracts include an inspection contingency, even in today's market, and every inspection will uncover at least one problem that needs to be repaired, even if it's a brand new house. Buyers commonly attempt to use the home inspection findings to negotiate their purchase agreements. They do so even more in a seller's market, since it's the only real leverage they have once they're under contract. Leverage that they have control over anyway, and that they can try to exercise. They typically ask sellers to either reduce the sales price, pay closing costs, or make repairs before closing. This obviously will cost the seller money, and depending on how quickly the repairs can be done, which also have to be approved by the buyer, will cost you time as well. Sellers are under no obligation, however, to make concessions to the buyer, and if they refuse to alter the original agreement, the buyer may back out. However, big however, if the inspection reveals the home is in good shape, Or the buyer is highly motivated and they decide to just drop their negotiation attempts over inspection repairs and request to move forward and take the house as is, which they may decide to do. This means that you can't back out of the buyers, out of the agreement, because the buyers are willing to make it work and move forward. Now let's talk about if the seller wants to refuse to modify the contract if the house appraises low or lower than the sales price. The seller may also be able to get the buyer to terminate the purchase agreement by refusing to modify the contract if the home appraises below the agreed sales price. This scenario could happen if the buyer's offer is contingent on securing a mortgage, and obviously the lenders won't approve a mortgage any higher than the appraised value of the home or the market value of the home. So if the appraisal is lower than the purchase price, then the sale could fall through unless certain things happen. This first is the seller could lower the sales price to the appraised value. The next would be that the seller gives the buyer time to find a new lender, which means rewriting the agreement or the offer. And then the third is that the buyer brings extra cash to the closing, making up the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value. The buyer and the seller, or both together, could convince the lender to challenge they could challenge the appraisal report as inaccurate. However, this scenario is rare. According to the Federal Reserve, research which says fewer than 10% of appraisals come in below the purchase price. And those that do are challenged, and that are challenged anyway, usually fail the challenge and the appraisal value sticks. In the event that the house does appraise lower than the sales price, and if nothing is able to be worked out between the seller and the buyer, then that's an opportunity for the seller to walk away. You should only do this after learning the type of financing that the buyer is using, though. The reason being is that if the buyer is using FHA or VA, and maybe even USDA or government type loans, then the appraisal is going to stick to your property for all other government type loans for I think it's 6 months. So this means that if your next buyer or your third buyer is a VA or FHA, then you're either going to have to sell at that appraised value, or you're not going to sell to them at all, or they're going to bring all the other things I said. Hey, before I give you some more tips on how to persuade a buyer to let you out of an agreement, I want to ask you to do me a favor. And this is kind of pathetic, but I just wanted, this is kind of a social test here. My social links are down in the description. I would love for you to come follow me on Facebook or Instagram or something like that. It's free. It'll take you less than a minute to do. So please go and do that. It would make my year. So just go ahead, go now and do that. Just pause this. Come on, you can go ahead and go do it. Did you do it? All right, pause this and go do it. I'll be waiting right here. Links are in the description. So now let's discuss another way a seller can persuade the buyer to cancel the contract. In the absence of any clear legal avenues to back out of the deal, the seller's only option may be trying to persuade the buyer to cancel the contract on their own. At this point, the buyer has likely developed an emotional attachment to the home, and moreover, they already sold their current home, or they're in the process of wrapping all of that up, and nixing the deal could leave them temporarily homeless. The most effective strategy to overcome those hurdles is one that most sellers probably would refuse to do anyway. Offer the buyer cash, a lot of cash. The seller holds virtually zero leverage in this situation. It's hard to imagine any buyer would simply walk away without significant incentive to do so. And once the seller has all the leverage when your house is on the market, but once you're under contract, for the seller anyway, it's hard to get out. The seller can also try to make an emotional appeal to the buyer. Sometimes when sellers present a genuinely compelling reason that they want to back out of the sale, a new job fell through, death in the family, divorce, etc., a more empathetic buyer might agree to release them from the contract. However, if the seller is trying to back out because they think they can get a better offer, or they even received a better offer, that's probably not going to do the trick. Well, hey, that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for stopping by, and until next week,